Now 2-on-1 the other way. Dom Shine on one side. Got a third man with Seider out of the box. Seider walks in. Score! Oh, Seider!
Robertson wants the puck and he scores!
The Ottawa Senators are proud to select Shane Pinto.
Rebound scores! Shane Pinto has his first National Hockey League goal!
Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan, and today we're going to be picking one potential breakout player from every single NHL team in the 2022 NHL season. Now there's so much young talent out there, so many talented prospects and players who've yet to take that next step into the NHL level. But that all changes this next season. I picked a player from all 32 NHL teams, from your favorite NHL team, players who I think will take that next step into being fantastic NHL players, not just prospects, but young, fantastic players in the NHL. But who do I see as the breakout player from every single NHL team and your favorite NHL team this next season? Watch till the end for all of the picks, and make sure you do, because we got some hot takes and some really interesting predictions in this one. So make sure you watch all the way through and subscribe if you are new. 60% of people watching are not subscribed. Every bit helps, and if you are a hockey fan, this is the place to be. Now, in today's video, we're going to go division by division, team by team, and breakout player by breakout player. And we're actually going to start out in the Atlantic Division, and start out with the Boston Bruins breakout player for 2022. This is a player that I believe in pretty hard right now. A guy that, even though he might not be the clear-cut best option for the Boston Bruins, he's still a guy who I think will get a lot of games in, who has a quiet presence for them that was needed last year, and I think we'll transition that onto 2022. I'm going to go for the first breakout player for this video and go for a guy who I have a lot of faith in Jeremy Swayman. Jeremy Swayman was awesome for the Boston Bruins last year. In 10 games played, had a .945 save percentage, was rock solid for them, and he needed to be for the Boston Bruins to stay afloat in that second half. They had some big trouble when it comes to goaltending, and Swayman provided a little bit of a band-aid there for them. I think that will transition onto this next year. Even though Linus Ullmark is the starter, I think Swayman could get a lot of games in, and again, be the future of the Boston Bruins franchise in net. Now we're going to move on to the Buffalo Sabres, though, a team that has so many breakout options, mostly because there's nobody else that'll really be playing for them. I mean, I guess Cody Eakin is a Buffalo Sabre still, but I think for my breakout player for the Sabres, I'm actually going to go for a surprising one, and one of my hotter takes in Casey Mittelstadt. Now, I know Casey Mittelstadt has not fulfilled his potential by any means, but he was really, really good after Ralph Krueger got fired last year. Of course, at age 22, the centerman has been through a lot, but in 23 games under Dan Granato, he was pretty fantastic, getting 49-point pace if it was a normal season, being great in terms of goal scoring. He was really a much different player and was a much more comfortable young prospect as well. I think with Granato being the head coach now and Mittelstadt likely getting a pretty big role next year, I think he'll have a pretty solid season and definitely the best by far in his NHL career. But next up, we're going to move on to the Detroit Red Wings breakout star for 2022 and move on to a guy that I have a ton of faith in, a guy who I think will be fantastic and maybe could be even in Calder contention this next year. We're going to move on to the Detroit Red Wings breakout star for 2022 and move on to German defenseman Moritz Seider. Now, I've been a big fan of Moritz Seider for a very, very long time, and obviously at the time it looked like a little bit of a reach where Detroit ended up drafting him, but this is a guy that's made major stride after major stride every single year since he was drafted, and at age 20 with the athleticism, with the maturity, he looks ready to take that next step into the NHL. He's already got pro experience in the AHL. He was fantastic in the SHL last year. This is a guy that is truly ready, and although Detroit's defense is not fantastic, I think Seider will definitely aid it, and again, could be in the contention for the Calder Trophy this next year. But we're now going to move on to another team that has a really strong prospect in goal, and a team that I think if Bobrovsky doesn't end up that great, this guy could definitely fill into that starter role. We're going to move on to the Florida Panthers breakout star for 2022 and move on to USA stud Spencer Knight. Spencer Knight is just absolutely fantastic. One of the best goalie prospects USA has seen in a very long time, arguably since Connor Hellebuck or John Gibson. But next up, we're now going to move on to the Montreal Canadiens breakout star for the 2022 NHL season. This guy, technically, for some, might have already broken out, but I'm talking about just pure career regular season numbers here. This is a guy that in terms of the Calder Trophy likely is the clear-cut favorite to win it, and I think is the most obvious choice here. We're going to move on to the Montreal Canadiens breakout star in Cole Caufield. Now, I've always been a big believer in Cole Caufield. I had him 6th in my draft rankings back in 2019. Thought he was a major steal, 15th overall to the Montreal Canadiens, and that has just been proved right time and time again. Throughout the NCAA play, the World Juniors, the AHL, now the NHL, Cole Caufield has simply done it all. And if he wins the Calder Trophy, I will not be surprised. Was fantastic in the playoffs and should transition that over to this next season in Montreal, especially the Habs losing some guys like Tomas Tatar potentially. It could maybe make some more space for Cole Caufield as well. Now we're going to move on to the Ottawa Senators, though another team that has some fantastic options in terms of breakout players this next year. But to me, the most obvious one, a player that was great for them at the second half as well last year, I'm actually going to go center prospect Shane Pinto. Now, Shane Pinto was the first pick in the second round a couple of years back and has had some really nice progression. Some of my issues when it comes to potential might still be there, but Pinto's still a guy that I think has some great raw fundamentals, great defensively, fantastic in faceoffs, good maturity, and solid skating. Pinto was great as well for the Senators last year. He got 7 points in 12 games played. He's 20 years old, will likely have a good spot on that Sens team, and will be another player like Norris from last year and Stützle like last year, or the young player gets that young opportunity. I think when it comes to Pinto, he's the next guy in line and a big part of that Sens franchise going forward. But next up, we're going to move on to a team that doesn't really have that much to choose from, but we're going to go on to the Stanley Cup champions in the Tampa Bay Lightning. My pick is going to be Ross Colton. Was great in the playoffs for them, solid in the regular season in terms of goal scoring as well in the second half. He's a guy that has some good, solid potential, and with Tampa missing some depth this offseason, I think Colton could be one of those guys that goes into a bigger role and succeeds pretty well. Now we're going to move on to the Toronto Maple Leafs pick, though, and their breakout player for 2022. This guy is a guy that I projected to be their breakout player last year. Didn't get that opportunity, had some injury issues, but I think could be in the Leafs top 6 this next year, and a big part of that in Nick Robertson. Now, Nick Robertson, in terms of goal scoring, in terms of offense, is clear cut. We know how good he is. He was solid in the AHL, but again, had some injury issues that limited him quite a bit. But this is a player that if he makes a team out of camp, I think could be like their Alex Galchenyuk from last year, where he's put in that top 6 spot, and really only that top 6 spot. I'm not sure if he's a fourth line player of the NHL quite yet, or if he's able to fulfill that role, but as a top 6 guy alongside some great weapons, maybe alongside Nylander and Tavares, could be a really solid option for the Leafs. But now we're actually going to move on to the Pacific Division, a division with a lot of great young talent, and on paper the division sucks, quite frankly, but I think that also can mean a lot of younger players taking that next step and using those roster spots to their advantage. We're going to start out with the Anaheim Ducks and start off with a great example of that young talent in my breakout player from the Ducks in Trevor Zegras, a guy that we saw a decent bit with the Ducks in the second half last year, was kind of just all right, was trying a lot of things, defensively wasn't fantastic, but I think with the strength and conditioning he's gotten this offseason, could be one of the Calder favorites this next year, as he should be. Great skill, great offensive potential, and one of the best passers we've seen in a very long time. Now we're going to move on to the Calgary Flames, though, a team that has a decent amount of options. You could go maybe for a defender, but I think that defense is a little bit crowded, which leads a forward, in my opinion, to be their breakout player. I'm going to go with Dylan Dubé. Now, he was decent for the Flames this last year. What didn't really break out the way I thought he could, and I think he would still be my breakout player this time around. He got 22 points in 51 games played. He's 23, still has potential, and still could be a big part of that Flames franchise going forward. But now we're going to move on to the other team in Alberta, in the Edmonton Oilers, a team with a couple of really solid breakout options, but I decided to look at the defense and go with Evan Bouchard, 21-year-old offensive D-man, who although in the pro level hasn't really improved the defense too much, offensively there's still some real potential there, and I think behind Tyson Barrie on that second power play unit perhaps, Bouchard will get a lot of those offensive opportunities, a lot of that offensive zone time as he should. In terms of passing, in terms of offensive awareness, it's all there for Bouchard, but again, the defense will be a big struggle, I think, in his first NHL full season. Now we're going to move on to the LA Kings, though, a team with just a multitude of different breakout options, but for my breakout star this next year, I just had to go with Quinton Byfield. To me, Quinton Byfield is going to be in such a great place in the future. He'll have Philip Snow and Anze Kopitar to learn from, and I think this next season will be his first full one. He's still 18 years old as I'm making this video, which is crazy to think about, but he was great in the AHL, got some season in the NHL last year, and I think he's ready to take that next next step to be at least a third line center and get some good power play time as well on top of that. But we're going to move on to the next team in the San Jose Sharks, a team that I think has another couple of good options, but to me, one guy that is actually a sneaky one is Adin Hill in net. He, of course, was acquired by the Arizona Coyotes, and even though he is 25, I still think Adin Hill has some solid potential. He was low-key solid for Arizona last year, got a .913 save percentage in 19 games played, and I think for San Jose could do pretty well there. That defense is not great, but I'm hoping Adin Hill is able to succeed, a really solid person, and looks like a guy that could get that big opportunity this next year. But next up, we're going to move on to the newest NHL team in the Seattle Kraken, and they obviously went pretty young in the expansion draft, and I think in a couple of cases, it could actually turn out very, very well. In one of the cases, though, and I think the biggest case, and for the biggest breakout, I'm actually going to go with forward Mason Appleton, a guy, even though at age 25, hasn't really gotten his big break yet, but was great on the wings for Winnipeg last year, hard, intense, great worker, he's a honeybee out there, loves to grind play out and get the puck back for his team. I think he'll be a big part of this forward group for Seattle going in the future, and especially in year one, will be a guy that points-wise also has a career year. Now we're going to move on, though, to the other team in the Vancouver Canucks, a team that, in terms of playoffs, is in question right now, but in terms of actual breakout players, a guy that I think will actually have a pretty good role in Vasily Podkolzin. Now, Vasily Podkolzin is going to be an interesting one, because on the wings for Vancouver, there's some good options there, and they obviously added Connor Garland, which makes it a little bit more interesting, but I think Podkolzin could have a really solid season. I don't think he's going to be in the top 6 or anything, and I don't think he's going to get a 60-point campaign, but as a bottom 6, grindy, intense forward, I think he'll be right at home in the NHL level, and in a sheltered role, could be very, very solid for the Vancouver Canucks. But now we're going to go on to the last team in the Pacific Division of the Vegas Golden Knights, and to me, the most obvious player here is easily the player that they obviously don't want to give up in the Jack Eichel talks, in Peyton Krebs. Vegas' breakout player, I think, is going to be Krebs 100%. He's a guy that could definitely make that jump, I think, to the NHL and be pretty consistent. I don't think he's going to light the world on fire in year one, but I think in terms of a hard-working, intense, great overall center or winger, Peyton Krebs has a lot of versatility, and I think for Vegas is going to be a guy that's going to be a big part of that future. They traded a lot of prospects, but I think they view Krebs as one of their best players in the future, as they should. Krebs is that talented, and again, in terms of Vegas' future, could be one of the best players in a few seasons' time. But we're actually going to move on to the Central Division now and the breakout stars from each team. And we're going to go and start out with the Arizona Coyotes, a team with actually a lot of good young options. But to me, the most underrated and a guy that I think will have a big opportunity on that defense is Connor Timmins. Acquired in the Darcy Kemper trade from the Avs this offseason, was pretty good for them in a depth role last year, 7 assists in 31 games played. With the Coyotes not having really any options on D besides Chikrin, I think Timmins will make the most of it and be a pretty solid player at age 22 for them. Now we're going to move on to the Chicago Blackhawks breakout player for 2022, and I'm actually going to move on to a guy that many people haven't even realized hasn't really even broken out yet, in Kirby Dach. Now, he was solid in his rookie year, was decent last year when he was healthy, but he hasn't really had a great season yet, but I think that'll change this next year. With the weapons that Chicago has, I think Kirby Dach will take that next big step, hopefully being fully healthy and ready to go for training camp. But next up, we're going to go to another team here in the Colorado Avalanche, and even though they traded away Timmins, they still have their fair share of great options, and I think the big breakout star for them this next year is going to be Alex Newhook, a super underrated option in terms of the Calder Trophy candidates. I'm not sure Bowen Byram will get that amazing opportunity like many people think he will. I think Alex Newhook, though, has a great option and a great chance to get in that top 6, with Saab being gone, with Donskoy being gone. The Avs are lacking a lot less depth, but I think Newhook can step into that role, was decent last year for them, and again, could be their young star center, which we know he will eventually be. But now we're going to move on to my favorite team, the Dallas Stars, and their breakout player for the 2022 season. And I'm actually going to go with a guy that was super consistent for them last year, but I think will take an even bigger step as well in 2022 in Jake Ottinger. Now, Jake Ottinger, I think, is going to be really interesting. At age 22, he was great for them last year in 29 games played, getting a .911 save percentage, a lot more consistent than who Dovan was. And if they go into the season with a Holtby and Ottinger tandem, I think there might be a little bit of issues in terms of Ottinger being a little bit more heavily relied upon, but I think he will make the most of it. He's a hard worker, determined player. I think he will be ready for that task next season. We're going to go on to the next team, though, and move on to the Minnesota Wild, a team with another just boatload of options here. But I actually decided to go with centerman Nico Sturm. Now, he is 25, or actually 26, and he is a little bit already established in the NHL. He was solid last year for them in a depth role. But I think Nico Sturm will be more relied upon this next year, especially with Nick Bonino going to San Jose. Their center situation isn't quite as pretty now, but I think Sturm will take that next step, be a solid player for them, and Minnesota made sure to not have him exposed in the expanded draft. They'll use him quite well and use him as much as they can. Now we're going to go into the Nashville Predators, though, and a team that has a lot of younger options as well, but I think a guy that could get some major opportunity this next year is Luke Kunin, a guy that could play center, could play wing, but he's 23. Last year got 19 points in 28 games played. I think over a full season, Luke Kunin could be really, really solid, and with Nashville lacking some options in the wing, I think Kunin could fit that role quite well and be a young energizer that Nashville needs next year. So next up is the St. Louis Blues, and even though I have their jersey up here, there's really not that many options for them, really. I mean, Scott Perunovich is a huge wild card. He had season-ending surgery last year. Who knows what's happening there? So I decided to go with Ivan Barbashev, a guy that I still think they have pretty big stake in, a player who I still believe in could be a decent middle six guy. I'm not sure how much opportunity he gets, but I doubt that St. Louis has another Jordan Kyrou like they did last year. Now we're going to go on to the next team, though, in the final team, the Central, in the Winnipeg Jets, and this is a player that I think will break out big time this next year. Has already had a couple of really solid seasons, but I think will have a career year and be just amazing for Winnipeg in Pierre-Luc Dubois. Now, I know he scored 60 plus points before, and he's already a really established NHL player, but he was not that great for Winnipeg last year, was not that really consistent nor impactful, but I think that'll all change this next year. For full training camp in Winnipeg, getting to know his teammates completely well. He also changed his number, of course, to honor his great friend and fallen teammates in Minus Kivalinks. I think when it comes to Pierre-Luc Dubois, he'll be motivated, he'll be consistent, and will be in that Winnipeg program to start out, which I think is huge. I think he'll have an amazing season and his best yet in 2022. And we're now going to go on to the Metro Division, last but not least, and there are so many young, talented players here that'll take that next step this next season. And we're going to start out with the Carolina Hurricanes, arguably the team with the least amount of potential breakout guys this next year. But to me, the guy that makes the most sense is Ethan Bear. When it comes to Carolina, their defense is still very, very solid, and they still got some decent puck movers on that team. But I think even Bear could get a decent opportunity potentially on that top four, and maybe could also get some power play time. We'll see what happens with Even Bear, but I think he could have an opportunity in Carolina to do quite well. But we're now going to move on to the next team in the Columbus Blue Jackets, a team with a boatload of options, and hey, even one from Carolina and Jake Bean. But I decided to go with another young defenseman in Adam Boqvist. Of course, a top 10 pick back in the 2018 NHL draft, a guy that's been in Chicago's system for quite a while now, looked pretty good for Chicago last year in an offensive role, got 16 points in 35 games played, but now in Columbus could be the main guy there besides Zach Werenski, could be on that second power play, could kind of get that Evan Bouchard offensive treatment, and I think it could work out pretty well. Even though Columbus isn't an offensively inclined team, there's still some good weapons there, and I think Adam Boqvist will find a home pretty well. Now we're going to move on to the next team, though, in the Metro Division, and actually go on to the New Jersey Devils, a team with a couple of great options. You might say Alexander Holtz, or might be also some people saying Ty Smith, but to me, this player a little bit broke out last year, not as much as maybe some people expected, but I think when it comes to points, when it comes to national attention, he'll break out big in 2022, and I'm going to go with the New Jersey Devils breakout player in Jack Hughes. Now again, he improved a lot last year in a lot of different areas, was a lot more consistent, a lot more adaptable to physical pressure, but I think in 2022, that gets even better. I think his point totals are really going to start to look great for a first overall pick. Now we're going to go on to the next team, though, in the New York Islanders, and they have a couple of solid options, but I think the one that makes the most sense in terms of their breakout player is Oliver Wallstrom. He was good in a short sample size last year. In 44 games played, got 12 goals, 9 assists for 21 points. But as the Islanders maybe lose a little bit of depth in the offseason, I think Oliver Wallstrom could be a guy that breaks out pretty big. Now, they are seemingly keeping guys like Palmieri in the system, which I think leaves less opportunity for Wallstrom. But in the bottom six, maybe third line role, I think Wallstrom was pretty solid last year, and the goal scoring will continue to come. But next up, we're going to move on to the New York Rangers breakout player for the 2022 NHL season, and there's so much to potentially go with here. You could go Kakko, Kravtsov, Lundkvist, maybe even Shesterkin as a true breakout season. But to me, the player that makes the most sense here for the Rangers and their breakout star for season 2 of his career, we're going to move on to the first overall pick and move on to Alexis Lafreniere. It just makes too much sense with Gerard Gallant coming in. I think he's going to get a lot better of an opportunity. I think Lafreniere is going to get a great chance to show his skill, which was kind of lacking, especially to start out last season. But I think when it comes to Lafreniere, the future is still bright. He's still going to be amazing in New York, and I think year 2 will be a big improvement. Now we're going to go on to the Philadelphia Flyers, and this might be one of my hotter takes in today's video. A pick that's a little bit unorthodox, but I think is a pick that could definitely work out for the Philadelphia Flyers. We're going to move on to defenseman at age 26 in Rasmus Ristolainen. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't think Ristolainen is going to bounce back for any fundamentally sound reason. I think he's going to bounce back because he went from the Buffalo Sabres to the Philadelphia Flyers, and that is simply it. And the Flyers are banking on that. If Ristolainen does not bounce back, their defense could look at once again pretty horrible. But I think he's going to bounce back in a big way and have the best season of his NHL career. Now we're going to go on to the Pittsburgh Penguins. They don't really have too many options. I don't see Sammy Poulin taking that next step quite yet. So I'm going to go with former Duck and former Bruin in Danton Heinen. Now he might not play center. Maybe he's a winger there in Pittsburgh. But I think either way, Heinen still has potential as a solid defensive forward. He's a guy that's good in transition, decent offensively too. But in terms of the defense, puts up some great efficient results. And I think in Pittsburgh's bottom 6 could be a really solid player there and could be a big part of this next season for them. But we're now going to move on to the final team to talk about in today's video and the final breakout player, and we're going to move on down to the Washington Capitals. And I was tempted to go with the easy pick in Ilya Samsonov, and I think he will have a great year as well. But I'm actually going to move on with a little bit of a riskier pick here and go on to the Caps breakout player in Connor McMichael, a player who was great in the AHL last year, fantastic in the OHL before that, great in the World Juniors as well. McMichael just gets better and better with every single level he goes to, and I think that will continue. There is a chance he does play in the AHL again next year, but I think there's a good chance he goes in the NHL and does not look back. The Capitals need an infusion of youthful talent, and I think McMichael is just what the doctor ordered. Great IQ, great fundamental passing and offensive abilities, and I think he'll be a great mainstay on the Capitals in the future. If it's not this year, it's next, but I think this year could be the year we finally see him step into the NHL and again be a great player and potentially a star player for the Capitals in the near future. That'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that notification bell to get notified on all the new live streams and all the new videos when they come out. Make sure you comment down below what do you agree and disagree with my picks, and who do you see as the breakout player from your favorite NHL team this next season. Let me know all your thoughts. Make sure you share this video with your friends, get it out there, and click on this card for all of my hockey prospects, rankings, and talk all in one playlist. My name is Navy. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.